Today I want to share a brief tutorial on how you can place windows in sloping walls. A lot of you have been playing with using masses to go through and create unusual forms with sloping walls, with curving walls like domes, and the problem we run into is that when we try to place conventional Revit window families, they don't adapt the slope of the wall. They still present themselves vertically. And you end up with a problem that looks something like this. I'm choosing kind of a standard Revit window family. And you'll see when I place it in the walls, they actually place vertically because that's the way they're defined. It's placed in a vertical wall, and you end up with this little gap at the top and the bottom, and it really just doesn't create the effect you'd like. So the solution to that is we actually have to create a new window type, one that is face-based and that will actually adopt the slope the wall is placed in. And let me show you how you can go ahead and do that. Actually, I've created one already. Let me show you what it looks like just to kind of motivate it. Then we'll talk about how I did go through and create it. I'm going to choose window face-based, my new custom family, as opposed to fixed. I have fixed face-based. So again, what fixed would do is place like this. That's not what I want. What fixed face-based will do is place more like this. And that is the effect we're trying to achieve. Okay, so let's talk about how we go through and create that type of window. It all starts by basically creating a new custom component. We do that by going to the Revit menu and saying New, Family. And then of the different family types, we're going to be looking for one that's generic, model, face-based. Let's open that up, and we'll have here the Revit family creation environment. Okay, in this environment, you'll see that we have a couple of reference planes going back or front to back, as well as left to right, going ahead and indicating how we will place our object. The intersection there is the insertion point. And we have this rectangular area. If we look at that in 3D, you'll actually see that's a rectangular volume. That's actually representing the plane, the surface that we're actually going to be placing the window in. So what we're going to do is basically place and create this window relative to that plane. That'll get substituted by the face that we're actually placing the window on at the time we place it in the project. Okay, so as we are starting, there's just a couple things we'd like to do just to let it know that it's a window and how to interact with the plane properly. If I go to this first choice, Family, Category, and Parameters, we can say that this is going to be a window. The reason it's important to say it's going to be a window is that'll help it out when we actually place it to be understood as a window. It'll respond using visibility and graphics or any of the view controls to anything you say about a window. This will actually adopt the same behavior. So it's good to get it into the right category. The other thing we want to do is actually turn on this important parameter right here. It's cuts with voids when loaded. We're going to actually put a hole in this plane that'll represent the window cut, and we do want that to happen in the plane too. We do want that when we place it to go ahead and cut that hole so that we have the opening that you'll be able to see the window through. So go ahead and turn on windows and turns cuts with voids, and we're ready to go. Okay, once we've gone ahead and set those two important parameters, let me switch over to the floor plan view. This is really just looking dead on, face on to the plane, as opposed to looking at it in the elevation. This has to do with the orientation we're looking at it from. And here I'm going to go through and start defining a couple important things. We'll start by creating the void, and then we'll go through and create a window frame, as well as the glazing. And to do that, what I tend to do is actually start by placing reference planes. This is a good common technique whenever you're going through and placing parametric or creating parametric families. Rather than just sort of creating geometry, planes actually give you a strong reference to go ahead and hang the geometry on, so they give you a little more control. What I'll do here is actually say, let me go to the annotate, grab a dimension. I'll throw a few dimensions on here to let me parametrically control the location of these planes. I'm going to put one in here that's going to basically allow me to set the equal constraint and make sure that whatever I do is always centered left-right around the insertion point. Same thing here. Going vertically, I'm going to center that so it's always centered top-bottom around the insertion point. Then I'm going to put another dimension on it that's going to let me just control the size of the opening. Now, how we turn these dimensions into parameters is to choose them, and then in the options bar we can actually see there's a little label choice. Right now there's nothing associated with that dimension. We can choose one of the existing parameters or add our own. For this one I'll just choose the existing width, and I'll choose this one as the existing parameter height. Okay, and that'll now give me the ability to flex those. Now, before we go through and actually create the void, let's start just by flexing the parameters. Make sure the reference planes are moving right. If I do that, let me go ahead and say maybe 4 feet wide by 6 feet tall. Just see if that's responding appropriately. And it looks like it's actually doing just fine right now. So we're ready to go ahead and start creating some geometry. Say okay. Okay, we've got ourselves some reference planes. When it comes time to create some geometry, I'll go to the Create tab, and I can create either solid forms, a solid extrusion, or in this case I'm going to create a void. I'll create a void extrusion. And what I usually do is just I'll tend to draw inside the reference planes first, and then go back and use the Align tool to choose the reference planes and lock the edges of my geometry to the reference plane. I just like to do that very explicitly. If you're good about drawing, you can often get them to associate implicitly, but I really like to make sure it happens. So I've got the edges of that set up just fine. I have the notion of the start and the end of the extrusion. Let me finish that and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in a section. So if I look in 3D, you'll sort of see I have this void which is about 1 foot tall standing above the plane. What I can do is go to one of the elevations, which in this case is like cutting a section. Choose that, and let me just stretch that down. I'm going to stretch the void down so it'll definitely be as thick as any plane it might be put into. So maybe like -2 foot. Beautiful. Okay, and if it's only going to really be cutting from the hosting element, the plane, it's okay if it's a little bit long, it won't cut excess things out. Okay, let's go back to 3D. You'll say, hey, this looks pretty good. The void is sitting there on top of the plane, but it's not really cutting away from the plane. So we have to do one additional thing. What we have to do is actually choose the cut tool, and then choose the void, and then the plane, and then it'll finally cut the hole out. You gotta shade that just so you can sort of see it. It's not looking too awfully bad, and what we want to do now, just because this is actually a pretty useful object unto itself, is do a little save as a family. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and put this out on my desktop. I'm going to call this, this is a nice parametric opening. Face-based. And that might be useful to us later, so let's kind of keep it hanging around. That sounds like a pretty good thing to have, so we can put that on any face and make just a nice opening which is normal to the face. Okay, so far so good. We are ready now to go back and add a little positive geometry to this. So let's go back to the floor plan and we'll do that. Now, as I think about putting this frame in here and putting in the glazing, I'd like to have a little control over the thickness of the frame, maybe make that a parameter that I can change from window to window. So I'm going to say, let's put in a few more reference planes. I'm drawing these inside of the void boundary. Now if I want to make those parametrically controlled, what I need to do is go through and add some dimensions. So I'm going to add a dimension from here to there. Again, making sure I get the reference planes. Here to here. You notice right now they're not all the same size. That's okay. We're going to make them all the same size in just a minute. Great. So I've got these 4 different dimensions that are controlling the width of the frame. What I now want to do is actually choose one of those, and I'm going to associate a parameter with it. Now I don't already have a frame width parameter, so I'm going to add a new parameter called frame width. And as we're doing this, you can choose whether you want it to be a type parameter or an instance parameter, just based upon you want to change it on a family basis, or whether you want to go through a type by type basis, or whether we want to do it instance by instance. And I'll leave it as a type parameter for now. Okay, what I can now do is take these other ones and also associate them with frame width. That way it'll be nice and even. Beautiful. Now frame width is sort of this odd dimension here, just under 4 inches. If I want to flex that a little bit, I can. Let me go through and put in a nice value in here like, 4 inches or 3 inches, whatever I think is going to be appropriate. Just again, always making sure that the reference planes flex before I go through and create the geometry. You always want them to be doing the right thing and the geometry will follow. Okay, with those reference planes in place, we are ready to go through and create a couple of extrusions that represent both the frame and the glazing. And to do that, let me go ahead and just draw a nice frame. Okay, again, I'm going to keep it on the inside and align it. Okay. This is going to be something that has an outer boundary and an inner boundary, so it'll create a hole in the middle of the frame. I will align that to the edge. This is the outside of the frame. And then I'll go back and also align the inside of the frame to those inner reference planes so that we have the frame having the right width. Looking good. Okay, that's all locked away. Let me finish that up. We'll go through and adjust the dimension here in just a second in terms of start and end. In general, what I want to do is go through and let me take a look at that in the front view. I want to control really where that frame sits relative to the plane. Right now it's sitting on the outside of the plane. What I can do is choose that and pull on down. Maybe even pull this one on down and just set where how far inset and how far to the outside you want that to be. Maybe for the inset, maybe like -3 inches. For the outside, maybe about 1 inch out. And again, these are things that you can set parametrically if you want to be able to control them. Or if I put them in this way, it's just going to be fixed for the window type. So I have a little bit of a frame right now. Let's take a look at that in 3D. Not looking too awfully bad. The last thing we're going to do is put some glazing in here. So let's go through and create, again, a nice extrusion. I'll just use the rectangle tool since I know it's a nice regular shape. And I will do an aligning the top, right, bottom, and left. Okay, super. Once again, I'm going to adjust the thickness of that. Let's come back and take a look. You'll see it's hanging around out here. There's the outer surface. Let me go ahead and do something like this. We're going to go through and maybe set the outer surface to 0. For the inner surface, maybe like -3/8 of an inch, something like that. And again, we can go through and choose exactly where these want to be relative to really the architectural effect we're trying to achieve, whether you want something inset or give it parametric control if you want to have just the ability to kind of change this more readily as opposed to defining it in the family. Come back over, it's looking pretty darn good, except for one important feature. You'll notice that it's all a bunch of this gray material, the default gray material, and we don't want that. We want this to actually look like glazing. So what I can do is choose each of those different extrusions. I'll choose this glazing one. You see the material currently is set by category. I can either add a parameter, which what I think I'll do. I'll do the glazing material here, or just set a material. But I like to add parameters. So I'll say the glazing material. You can make it a type parameter or an instance parameter. I'll let this actually be changeable from window to window. Okay. That's going to associate it with a parameter. Okay. We'll change that to a default material in just a minute too. Over here, I'm going to associate a parameter too with a frame. I'll call this my frame material. Again, you have the choice of whether it's a type parameter or an instance parameter. This one I'm going to let be type. So I can have the same frame for all the ones in the same type, but change the glazing material on a window-by-window basis. Say OK. Now, currently, the default choice is still set to that plain old gray material. So what I'm going to do is actually give it some defaults that are a little bit better. For the glazing material, I'm going to call that just glass. That's already defined as one of the default materials. Okay. Let me apply that. That's looking pretty good. For the frame material, I have the existing materials. None of those look quite right. So I'm going to create my own material here. I'm going to say create a new material. Let me rename it. I'm going to call this my window frame. Okay, and for the appearance of it, I can choose a graphic appearance, but I'm going to actually choose a real material and pick it up from that. I'll say, let's go for some, like aluminum, if I can spell properly. Aluminum. Okay, maybe a nice anodized bronze. Okay. Then if we look at this, we can say use the render appearance. It'll pick up the same color and use that for the graphics. Apply that. Okay, we got one good looking window now. So what we can do is save this away. Again, you always want to save it as a family so you can reuse it. And I'm going to make it not just parametric opening, but I'm going to make it sort of a fixed window, face-based. Okay. And we will go ahead and save that away. Okay. Now we're ready to load it into our project and use it. So to do that, we say load project. I'm going to put it into my sloping window demo project. Okay, I'm going to overwrite the existing version just because we just kind of created a brand new one. And let's take a look at placing it. So again, we're going to choose the window tool. Fixed window face base, there it is. I can place it on any surface. If I want to go through and change the size, I can do that. So for example, this one is 4 by 6. If I want to duplicate this and create one that is more, like 8 by 8, I can do that. I can change the window frame material, or go and choose the glazing material. If you want to have some sort of special condition, the glazing material is just right out here, as in the instance parameters. Okay. The nice thing about this face-based window is it is pretty smart. So let's go ahead and I'll demonstrate it in a much worse condition, which is the dome over here. The dome actually has, just every surface, every point slopes a little bit differently. Let me go ahead and put a smaller one in there just so you sort of get the effect. But if I go ahead and choose that, and then come over, try that again. Window face based. There we go. I can go through and put it here, but I can also put it up here. Okay, so hopefully you'll see that's an incredibly useful window to have because it will really adapt to almost any face that you want to go ahead and place it on. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, just go ahead and write to me at glenn@bimtopia.com and we'll keep on producing new tutorials to kind of answer the questions you have. Okay, you take care.